Good evening, good morning, good day. My name is Moazli Mayem. I'm the Lynn Pippinger Dean of the University of South Florida Muma College of Business. And let me tell you, I am so happy, so excited, so honored to see you back for the second week for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Workplace Certificate at the Muma College of Business of the University of South Florida that we are doing in conjunctions with Jabil and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And guess what? We are now more than 125,000 participants. Yes, almost 130,000 participants. And I cannot say enough to thank the team who worked really hard to add all the people on the waiting list. But now we have to close the registrations, and don't give up if you couldn't make it. We promise we will keep your email with us, and then we will inform you as soon as this certificate and others are offered again. Speaking about emails, please make sure you add these 3 email addresses to your safe senders in your email systems: usf.edu, academiacentral.org, usf-tampa-ccsan.com. This will ensure that we will send you the emails and you will receive them. And again, we received so many feedback, and we understand feedback is a gift, and we appreciate your feedback. And as Dr. Doreen McCauley taught us last week, we are listening and we are making necessary adjustment as much as we can, starting immediately. So talking about the feedback, let's see what we are changing starting now. The first thing that we are changing is that many of you said that that chat is really just displaying very quickly and annoying some people, causing them to lose concentrations. I know it did it for me too. So we're listening to this, and we are hiding the chat, deactivating it on the YouTube channel. But please remember, we value your feedback, your experiences, your comments. This is how we all can improve. So you can provide your feedback and your suggestions, your experiences through LinkedIn at USF Muma, or using Twitter at USF DEI Certificate. Also, one of the other changes that we will be making is for captions. We received a lot of feedback about captions. So we have very short-term solutions, but I promise you we're working on other solutions. So let's start with the short-term solutions. Is we provide or we allow for auto captions through the LinkedIn platform. We have two platforms, YouTube or LinkedIn, that are exactly the same. The only difference is that LinkedIn also allows for auto captions. But also, we promise you, we are working really, really hard on providing transcription so that we can make this experience better for everyone who relies on caption. And we will keep you updated, but you have my commitment. We're working really hard on this. Also, some other feedback, of course, the quizzes, as we mentioned last time, would be 30 minutes live after each session concludes. So if we finish at 7 Eastern, 7:30, you will see the quizzes. Now, we received a lot of feedback that 2 weeks to take the quiz is for some people a little bit challenging. Guess what? Yes, I'm in a good mood, so we're allowing for more flexibility. And now we no longer impose the 2 weeks deadlines, and all quizzes must be completed. Please remember, write it down, May 19, 2021, 11:59 p.m. So you don't have to rush. You don't have the issue of 2 weeks. You have up to May 19 to take all the quizzes. Also, one more thing, please remember, I know we're all very competitive. We end at 100%. You don't need 100%. You only need 70% on each quiz to be able to earn that certificate, and no need to retake the quiz if you have already 70%. Please remember that answers to many of your questions can be found online in the FAQ sections at usf.to/DiversityCertificate. We really appreciate your patience and understanding. And please understand, now we're very close to 130,000 participants. If just 10% sends emails, one email per day, that is 13,000 emails that the team has to process and answer one by one. And here, I really appreciate your patience and understanding, but I'm so grateful to a group of wonderful students from the USF Muma M3 centers who are working tirelessly in answering your emails, led by the wonderful colleague and Professor Jihan, who is our hero, taking care of all technical issues. And of course, a second hero, Ms. Lori Briggs, who is behind the scene, making sure that everybody is progressing and doing a good job for 130,000 participants. And please remember, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace is a journey. We are on this journey together. And we are not arguing that we have the answers to all questions or solutions to all problems. We don't. We don't. Actually, a colleague of mine came to me and said, Moaz, this is really stupid thing that you are doing with this certificate. It is controversial. It is very expensive. Where you're going to get the money from? You're going to be criticized or everything. I looked to this friend and I said, you know what? I've done many stupid things in my life. And if you have any doubt, ask my kids and my wife. But if this is one of the most stupid things I've done, I really want this to be the best, most stupid things I've ever done, because together we're making a difference. And even though we don't have the solutions to all the problems, we have the passion, the energy, and the commitment to help all of us throughout this journey, so that we have a community where no one is left behind. And I really want to share with you something that I very much appreciate. You'll be surprised. Each one of us is a CEO. I am a CEO. You are a CEO. You might think, what? I am not a CEO. No, you are a CEO, and your life is your company. We are the CEOs of our own lives, our own companies. So what do we do as CEOs? We hire people into our life. We promote people in our life. And sometimes we have to let go people from our lives. That's why we are the CEOs. And now I have a challenge. Please write it down. I have a challenge for all of us, including me. And that challenge is, starting tomorrow, please reach out to a person in your workplace, if you're students in your school or in your neighborhood, a person who is different from you. And the challenge is to really hire that person to be part of your company, part of your life. And when I say a person who is different, means different race, different gender, non-binary, different sexual orientation, transgender, disabled, different religion, different national origin, different color, or, and this is important, any other difference as you deem fit. You know why you? Because you are the boss. You are the CEO. You make the decision to hire that person. And now also, based on your feedback, we wanted to give you a little bit of what will you see tonight. So remember, each module will have 3 sections, and each section is really important for the overall goal of the module. So opening sessions, a second segment with a keynote. Usually the opening session is also a panel. The second one is usually a keynote speaker and an instructional segment. Now, remember, the overall goal of the certificate is to help organizations and individuals throughout this journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Today, we have a tremendous, really a great session. I think you would absolutely love it. The purpose of the goal is to learn about stereotypes and biases. We all, in the workplace, of course, we all have these stereotypes and biases. So we will learn with these three wonderful colleagues, Cecil, Tony, and Alexis, how do we detect these biases and how can we in our organizations, in our lives, try to address these stereotypes and biases who could be really damaging and lead to discrimination and racism in many places. But first, we will have our wonderful Dr. Alexis Mudu leading a panel discussion with guests from different diversity races, and they will share with us their experiences, but also their recommendations of what they would like to be seen in organizations so they would not be discriminated against, and will, as much as we can, address racism. After that, we will have an incredible keynote speaker, Valerie Alexander, who will provide great information about biases. But before we go, I really want to share with you a great video that resonates so well with me and in a way so compatible with the spirit and the objective of this DEI certificate. This video was produced several years ago by Ad Council. I really hope you will like it. Again, before I leave you with this video, thank you so much for being here. This is so exciting. We have a great session for you. So long, and I will see you next week. Thank you.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. does it see race?
Love has no age limit.
That's my best friend.
We are neighbors and best friends.
We all have different religions, but we have universal love as well.
I love my sister.
Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Thank you, Dean Lamayam. And this video is beautiful, but let's remember that it is 5 years old and hearts have not embraced race, as we've seen in the last year and certainly recently with the aggressions, violent aggressions against Asian Americans, and certainly with George Floyd's trial ongoing right now and the brutalities that Black people have suffered in history and have been showcased in the last year. So thank you for that video. But this is the point of this certificate, right? Is to perhaps go into this new direction, or in a direction where we can see things equitably and in a diverse manner. And so to start today, first, welcome to Module 2. This is Alexis Mutu. I should have started with that. I have the great pleasure of hosting 4 wonderful people today. We're having a panel, and we're going to be talking about stereotypes and biases in the workplace suffered by people of color and from a religious point of view. And please note that we will be addressing other stereotypes along in different modules. But today, for the 30 minutes that we have for this panel, we're focusing on religion a bit and also on race and sexual orientation in some instances. So without further ado, I would like to start introducing my first panelist, Opal Hudson. She is Senior Director of Community and Social Relations for the Hillsborough County Appraiser's Office. Welcome, Opal. Next, we have Heba et al. She is Campus Director for the Institute for Engagement and Democracy at Miami-Dade College. Third, we have Donnie Kroom, who is a management to IT delivery and performance consultant, and he's got 20 years worth of experience. And last but not least, I'm happy to welcome Miguel Hernandez, who is an Associate Dean of Students at the University of California, Irvine. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Module 2 and for sharing parts of yourselves with us today. So I'm going to start with asking you to tell me a little bit about yourselves beyond your job. So Opal, how about you start?
Thanks, Alexis. Thanks for having me here today. Excuse me. I am a biracial female who identifies as a Black woman, typically because there's not 2 boxes to check, but when there are, I check both, but I identify as a Black woman.
Thank you, Opal. How about you, Heba?
Yes, I am a first-generation Arab American. I identify as a Sunni Muslim woman, and I am. My parents are originally from Jordan and Palestine, respectively.
Thank you. So, how about you, Donnie?
Similar to Opal, I was raised to check off Asian. My mother's from Taiwan. My father is actually a sandy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed farm boy from Minnesota. So growing up, it was always interesting for me, but I had the luxury of growing up in the United States Air Force, Air Force brat for 20 years, and looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, last but not least, how about you, Miguel? Why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure, happy to. Aspects of who I am that are extremely important to me include my heritage from Puerto Rico. Another very important piece for me is this identity of being Latino in the United States within the context of our country. I would also say being a man, and I would include in parentheses flaws and all, my friends, flaws and all. And finally, as I thought about our panel discussion today, another very important aspect of my identity is being a member of the LGBTQ community. Specifically, I identify as gay.
Thank you so much again for sharing of yourselves. It's very important as we are talking about stereotypes and biases through this module. So my next question is, and I'm going to go in the order where I started, right, with Opal. I am interested to know what experiences you've had in the workplace, taking into consideration how you've identified yourself.
Thank you, Alexis. That's varying, of course. I have you as a Black woman, there's a stereotype that comes with that as well. One being the angry Black woman. So that is definitely a huge part of what you have to deal with on a regular basis, or what I deal with on a regular basis. In fact, I actually just had a conversation a couple weeks ago with someone, a colleague, who questioned whether I was angry with them because of an email response, where in the email response I was just being truthful to a question that I was asked. So, there's that kind of thing going on. And then also you have the female aspect as well. So, things that can happen, or things that have happened to me, as far as, maybe, I'm in a leadership position. So, that comes with some duties and responsibilities and a demeanor as well. But then sometimes that's looked at, or comments can be made as, oh, I could go home to my wife and be, talked to that way, or whatnot, when it's really just directional. It's really just, had a male said the same thing, it would not be that type of an issue. So those are just a couple things. Okay, and so I just want to follow up a little bit. When you state the angry Black woman, I find that really interesting, because that is a pervasive stereotype in with Black women. And so as a biracial person, what does that mean to you? And how does that impact you, considering some people could say that you're really not Black enough? Well, and I mean, that's another aspect. And it may not be just because of the industry that I work in. I do need to say that I work in a white male-dominated industry, and I have for the past 15 years. So keeping that thought in mind, I don't so much anymore, but I have in my lifetime been, you're not Black enough, you're white, or you're not white enough, you're Black. When really I'm just me. I'm just who I am. I was raised to be very proud of who I am. I was very fortunate. My father is Black Bahamian. My mother is white from Pennsylvania. And I'm proud of them both. And they both raised me to be very proud of who I am. As far as the angry Black woman, I find it very offensive. I find that being able to communicate is important, especially in the professional, in the work environment. And I think that a lot of times we end up in situations where we're asked questions, but we really want the answer that we want. As human beings, we do that. And so when we don't get that, then it's taken a certain way. So, I just learned a wonderful phrase. Thank you for understanding and appreciating what a strong leader I am. And I'm going to start using that. But it's very offensive. It's very offensive. It's very disheartening. And you feel like you are being dismissed from the conversation, and that it's all about, and that goes for the woman part as well. It's all about your emotions, when really you were just trying to communicate professionally. Thank you so much, Opal, for sharing. So Heba, I'd like to ask you the same question, right? So what experiences have you had as a woman who is Muslim in the workplace that you have found difficult?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Something that sticks out to my mind, and I know I've had conversations about this before, is that I'm aware that looking at me, people may not automatically think or assume that I am Muslim. It's very much a part of my identity. It's who I am. I mean, I wake up every day practicing my faith and trying to practice the best ways of my faith. But a lot of times when people learn, and in the past this has happened a lot, they learn that I am Muslim in the workplace by either because maybe I need some extra time for prayer, maybe I have to take a holiday off because it's, our holidays don't really tend to fall on the traditional holidays in this country. So I'm looked at like, you don't look Muslim. And I always think in my head, and I've become more vocal about this because I think it's important, these microaggressions, or just implicit biases, there really is no way of correcting that unless I speak up in a respectful way, right? And that is a teaching of Islam, like to be as respectful as possible and be as kind as possible. And so now when I hear that, my answer back is, there is no one size fits all for religion. You cannot look like a religion, right? And it's important to understand that I am Middle East. I am of Middle Eastern descent, but it's important to understand that not every Middle Eastern person is Muslim, just like not every Muslim is Middle Eastern. There are different races, ethnicities, and all of that. Another thing that really sticks out and really feels like a punch to the gut whenever I hear this, or it's feedback from hearing that I am Muslim, is that I don't act like a Muslim. And I know that this goes back to that omnipresent level of fear-mongering that controls narratives of Islam. I understand, and a lot of times maybe people have not invested in the knowledge about my religion, but I wake up every day practicing kindness because that's an important part of my religion. I wake up every day trying to be the best version of myself that I can be for my faith. That's my identity. That's who I am. I pray. I fast when I need to. I'm Muslim, and to hear I don't act like a Muslim hurts. And so I think these experiences, I've learned how to respond back to it in the best way possible. But I think it's important for people to remember that sometimes innocently having feedback about something that you may not know too much about, and you have not invested that knowledge in it, on the receiving end, it speaks volumes, and it's things you never forget, because I have not forgotten that.
Thank you so much for sharing. And that's such a powerful way of expressing yourself and making all of us understand the stigma that is attached to your religion that is, completely out of turn, right? And so thank you. So Donnie, so you shared with us that you're also biracial. I was really interested in understanding what your experiences have been as someone who is, half white, half Asian in the workplace, and if you've experienced any kind of stereotypes and biases that have made it difficult for you to feel comfortable in those spaces.
Yes, thank you, Alexis. Absolutely. Let me talk about something else first, real quick. My father, he experienced it when he married an Asian woman in the 70s. He can remember seeing how people looked at him, how people viewed my mother, and he knew that people would view his children that same way. And my brother and I, we both favor Asian, but at the same time, I fully recognize I don't sound Asian to people. I fully recognize that sometimes I'm in a privileged circle where people will look at me as a white male. Growing up, similar to Opal, we talked about this previously. If there was only one box to check, my dad made sure I checked the Asian box. He wouldn't let somebody take that from me. He wrote a poem for me once, dealing with the fact that I struggled in certain circles where I was, if you will, the token white boy. In other circles, I was the token minority. I've seen the same thing in the workplace at times. I've been part of leadership teams where it's all males, all seemingly white males. And there are inappropriate stereotype jokes, people sharing different things that they've posted, that they've seen online, not that they've posted, but they've seen online, videos. It's conversations that occur that I think that if somebody was more maybe pronounced minority than myself, or a female, they wouldn't do that in that space. And so I sometimes wonder, do they not recognize or see me in that light? And what I've also seen is that, vice versa, and is actually applied into the same organization. A lot of the other, if you will, people that identify with other races, minorities, they would come to me. I was the sounding board because they did recognize that. They knew that I saw and I understood what was going on there. And it's really tough, especially when you work in organizations that have a The way it's been explained to me, it's a cronyism type atmosphere where the people at certain levels are pointed in and brought in. It can be very difficult when others aren't being heard.
Thank you so much, Donnie. And so, Miguel, can you share what some of your experiences have been? Your identity is so intersectional and fascinating to me, and so I'm really curious to know what experiences you've had in the workplace.
Absolutely. I think a principle that guides my work related to diversity, equity, inclusion comes from my Taino and Arawak ancestors. It is a practice that really connects to commonly to First Nation Native people in this country. It's the practice of storytelling. I believe that storytelling has the power to really change people's minds and people's hearts. And so now I'd like to share a little bit of a story with you all related to the topic of stereotypes and bias. On Saturday, June 11th, 2016, I was a doctoral student. I worked full time, and the month of June is a beautiful month where things calm down. It was so exciting. And some friends invited me to go to Universal Studios, and I was like a kid again. Like the park, I hadn't been in years, roller coasters, all of it, ice cream. I was so excited. And so we ended up spending the day in Orlando at Universal Studios, and it was a beautiful day. And throughout the day, we were trying to be what my college students tell me is grown. We talked about going out after the park and enjoying nightlife. And the conversation kind of went in and out of that idea for the rest of the day. By the time we got to dinner, the conversation dragged on, and we looked at each other, and unfortunately we had to admit that we were not as young as we used to be, and it was in our best interest to take the win of enjoying the park all day and head back home to our respective homes. Well, in the early hours of June 12th, I ended up arriving back in Tallahassee, and that is the time when the mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando began. I'll never forget the first phone call I got shortly after the shootings happened and began being reported. It was from my best friend asking if I was okay because she knew that I had been in Orlando. Soon after that, I got calls from family, text messages from family, all hours of the night, checking in, saying, "Are you good? Where are you? What's happening in Florida?" For many of my family members who don't live in Florida, geography doesn't matter. And so the fact that the reports were coming from Florida, everybody was in that place of crisis for my family. And so what I want to share is that the next day, Monday, at work, the responses from leaders and managers ranged. Some leaders and some managers checked in individually, personally, privately. Others didn't mention anything. Some managers didn't bring up the incident at all, or the multiple connections that I had to this particular crisis related to being Latino, being from Puerto Rico, and being gay. I also noticed in the days after that first week on our campus that the LGBT staff from other units were checking in on each other because our leaders and our managers were not checking in on us. And so we had to do that work for each other and with each other. And the thing that stands out to me even today as I reflect on this is that many of my colleagues talked about this idea that the silence that came from supervisors, mentors, people we looked up to and respected, and wanted to work for and learn from, added to the trauma and the difficulties of navigating that space. Additional burdens related to this particular story included being in a role and in a position of responsibility where many of us who identify with the LGBT community, had to organize vigils for the community, healing circles, dialogue spaces for our students, staff, and colleagues. That responsibility fell on our shoulders. And what I want to share with you all is that I was very proud to serve in that role. But what I still remember to this day is that my straight allies didn't show up. And that was hard. In terms of the concept of the workplace, of probably 6 to 10 staff members in that particular organization, most, if not all, have turned over shortly after that event because of how they were made to feel invisible and not seen. And so it's something to think about. Our workplaces are not immune from the tensions occurring throughout society. Many of us bring our fears, worries, pain microaggressions and macroaggressions that we experience literally coming to work, on the way to work even. And so one of the things that I want to share is that as a person of color, and with the various identities that we're talking about, I don't often share these burdens with leadership or management. We have been socialized and trained to not share these burdens with others. And so when a person of color brings a concern to a leader or a manager, you must understand the gravity and the importance of that experience and that opportunity. You have to understand that we don't make the choice to bring up issues that we're experiencing lightly. And so your job as a leader and a manager is to take our concerns seriously. It's to listen. It's to create a space where we can express what has happened. Just finally, Alexis, I want to just share that for our Black and African American sisters, brothers, and siblings on this call, for our Asian American sisters, brothers, and siblings on this call, for my Jewish brothers, sisters, and my Muslim brothers, sisters, and siblings on this call, if your leaders have not taken the courage or the time to let you know or to check in with you or to express any concern, I need you to know that I care, that I believe that you matter. I also need you to know that your family's existence matters to me, and that I give you my word that I will continue to use my spiritual, social, political, and economic privilege to continue advocating for a positive, sustainable change in the workplace and throughout our communities. Thank you for hearing my story.
Miguel, I can only say thank you, because in listening to you and to Donnie and to Heba and Opal, and thinking about my own experiences as a Black woman, a Black woman who's proud to be Black, right, and who understands my privilege because of my perceived lighter complexion or whatever else, I appreciate you making it clear that your experiences are similar to mine, or similar to Opal's, or similar to Heba's, to Donnie's, and so I thank you, right? I thank you very much. And so this is a good segue, right, into my last question to you. So, you know, when you think about what can people do, right? I mean, so Miguel said to listen, and we'll talk about that more during the instructional piece of this module. But Opal, what do you think people could do in positions of leadership in your workplace to make your experience better and more effective?
Thanks, Alexis. I just want to say real quick to Miguel, that was just the most beautiful thing. Shame on you for making me cry on live video, but I will see you later on that. But I mean, I can really resonate with the feelings of what you were experiencing, although be it in a different aspect for myself. But that resonates with me beyond what I expected to have to deal with in this call. So, or in this session today. So for me, Alexis, I think there's a couple of things, and I was thinking about that all day, and you know, what do I say, or all week, or ever since I've known that I'm going to be doing this, and a couple things came to mind. And so one of the things that I think, and I just think that in businesses, so I do a lot of different things. Not only do I work in this, you know, in my environment, but I also volunteer for, you know, an industry, and you know, I'm on a board, and so there's different aspects of how I see this whole thing kind of playing out. And so one of the things I think that businesses can do is, first of all, to slow down, because we're in this digital age, and I sound so old saying that, but you know, where we want immediate response. I have to say something. My word has to get out there. My, you know, whatever it is, right? We click and we want it immediately. And this isn't something that we're going to get immediately. This isn't something that's going to change today because we're all here, sitting here, you know, talking about it. This is not something that, to those of us on this panel who have lived this life, and same thing, you know, I was born in 1970, you know, so that was not an era where you even saw much, you know, biracial many biracial couples and things like that. So, I think that we need to slow down and we need to listen and we need to learn. We're just too quick to respond. So I think that's a big thing. Then we also need to create a truly safe space, and we all need to start speaking up. And I say this as a Black woman, and I'm not sure, maybe some of the other panelists have this issue, but because I am who I am, and it's not because I'm a Black woman, it's because of who I am vocal. I do care. I will speak up. I'm okay with doing things like that. Of course, you get labeled because I am also a Black woman. So you get that label as well. But then, and the same thing is, Donnie was saying, different colleagues will come to me and, my door can revolve and everybody's got the same issue, but everybody won't speak up. So, but it's twofold because I also understand that because there may not be an environment where you feel safe that you can do that and everybody is vocal. And that doesn't have to do with race, gender, sexual orientation or anything like that. But it does help too, because it can't always be that one person, and especially that person who may already be stereotyped and maybe unconsciously biased,
Thank you so much, Opal. I appreciate it. Thank you. So what about you, Heba? What would make your workplace more comfortable?
I have to say that I am in a workplace where I don't feel that, right? I don't feel that my voice cannot be heard. I work for a very compassionate and empathetic leader. I work in a team that understands, in a very diverse team that understands what it means to be inclusive and equity, right? But I do want to speak on behalf of what I do want to see in other workplaces that maybe I've worked for in the past, as well as individuals that may be feeling this, that are on this call right now, is that I said this before, and I'm going to say it again, is invest in understanding. Invest and be cognizant of stereotypes, not just with Arabs, not with Middle East people of Middle Eastern descent, but also Muslims, and also with everybody, right? Stereotypes that really fuel how we're thinking in the most negative of ways. And because of that, a lot of questions and a lot of defense type of attitude whenever it comes to maybe a Muslim asking for an extra 5 minutes, maybe 2 to 3 times a day to pray because their call to prayer may fall in that time. Days that we may need off because of our holidays. The fact that, if you're partaking in after work, for example, in an activity that includes drinking, understanding why a Muslim is not alienating themselves, but the fact that they just are not comfortable to be in that environment, right? Understanding and investing that time, it will make the workplace such a healthy environment. Your subordinates, your coworkers will feel safe, and having that open space to have that dialogue is important. So I just think that I'm so thankful that I'm in a workplace that I have that. And even if that was not the case, I'm okay with speaking about something I'm uncomfortable with, right? But many people aren't. One thing that I do want to say on this call is, I said this before, but I know that I don't wear hijab, right? So when someone looks at me as a Muslim woman, that's not a target, right? Because I don't wear it. So I want to also note that in the workplace, whether it's a new employee or somebody that just started wearing the cover, the hijab, make sure that microaggressions or that the way that you're feeling, don't simply judge someone based on their hijab in the workplace. Don't ask them these questions of why they do it, or assume that they're oppressed because they're wearing a hijab. Ask intentional questions by investing in that understanding, of course, to make them feel safe. Because that also is another thing, because a lot of times when you see a hijab on a woman's head, that's the only thing that you see and you don't see past that.
Thank you so much, Heba, and such great advice, and I appreciate it. And so, in the interest of time, we're going to ask Donnie and wrap this up in a bit. But so, what are your ideas around how to make a workplace better for someone who is, of Asian descent and wants to feel included and safe in a workplace?
Okay, thank you, Alexis. I think part of it goes back to what Opal was saying as far as slowing down. I like to believe our society's come a long way in my lifetime, but I certainly recognize we have a long way to go, and I don't think there's a shortcut. But I hope that this session hopefully accelerates that. I'll give you another example from the previous question that will tie into this. Being somebody who was raised by a mother where English was her third language. I've been in situations, I work in the technology sector. I work with a lot of people from Israel, India, China, and I've had people look at me as a universal translator. And there are people that react in terms of, well, they just need to speak clearer.
Right.
And then there's other people who react in, I'm sorry, I don't understand, because they know they're not as fortunate as I have to be able to have that ear, that trained ear. And so, going back to something Opal said, I think creating a safe space for those to try to figure out how do they come out when they're not as familiar with somebody like me or somebody who's accustomed to somebody else where English is not their first language. How do they approach and speak to them? But how do they interact with them so that they don't offend them? But I've seen people offend others or say we don't want them presenting because their English is not as clear. So that's definitely a solution. Much more, but I certainly recognize we have some time constraints. Thank you, Alexis, so very much.
I appreciate it. And Miguel, you started off with the solutions, and so I deeply appreciate it. I honor all of you for being transparent and sharing of yourselves. It is moving to me. I feel blessed and really fortunate to have been able to talk with you and to have you share these experiences, because your feedback is going to help so many people understand that they're not the only ones. And so thank you so much. And I wish you a great rest of your day and appreciate you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So now, without further ado, I am very, very, very fortunate to introduce you to our next guest speaker. Her name is Valerie Alexander. She is a renowned author, and she wrote Happiness as a Second Language. Welcome, Valerie, and thank you so much for joining us for Module 2. Thank you. You're on mute.
It's so funny because I hit unmute right before I started speaking.
That's okay.
No, but that's wonderful. But it's an extreme honor to be here, and it's fantastic to follow that panel because so much of what is already said has reflected the things I'm going to be talking about. So let's go ahead. I want to get my presentation started today so that we can dive right into bias, brain science, and stereotypes, or how I learned to stop making my coworkers feel like the other. So one hot day in Los Angeles, long before any of us ever heard the words social distancing, I was at Starbucks meeting with my bookkeeper. We sat at one of those big round tables in the middle because it was so crowded. And we were there a long time because I don't do my books very often. And various parties came and joined us and left. And one party was a woman with her 3 children. It was a little boy who was 9 and little girls who were like 6 and 7. And the little girls were so adorable. They were both trying to sit on the same stool next to mom. And then at one point they looked up and they noticed that my bookkeeper's hair is purple. And they were enthralled. So we got to have a really fun conversation with them about purple hair and their favorite colors and what books they were reading. And then they got up and laughed, and I turned around to my bookkeeper and I said, I am so curious about that little family. And she said, I know. But both of us knew better than to ask any of the questions we had about that family. Because you see, the mother was white. She was clearly white. And the 3 children were Black. So I want to ask you, what kind of questions does that family get asked every day? In fact, I'm going to launch this as a question. If you can either go to that tinyurl.com/speak inclusion, or with your phone, scan that QR code. that will open up a poll where you can answer that question. What kind of questions do you think that family gets asked every single day? And it is very important that you participate. As you're typing, you might have figured out by now that this right now, this talk is not a check out, check your email, play checkers on the side experience. It's time to opt in, to lean in, to get your whole body and brain into this, because your participation is required for us to make progress, for your company, your community, and this whole world to become more open and equitable. None of us can opt out. And I promise, if you opt in now, you will experience evolution in a way you never imagined. So hopefully you've been typing this whole time. Hopefully you got the URL to work, or the QR code opened up the poll question for you, and you've had a chance to type furiously. Some people can't type while someone else is talking, so I'll give it 10 seconds for everyone to finish typing the questions that family might get asked. And we'll close the poll and look at the answers. What questions do we think people ask that family, that mother and those 3 children every day? Shihan, can you share the answers from the poll? This is going to show up as a word cloud. And the way the word cloud works is the words that showed up the most are the ones that we see the biggest. So of course, adopted, Black, mother, father, children, nanny. Because these are the questions that are asked of that family. Are you the nanny? Where is their father? Are they adopted? Did you adopt them? Whose kids are they? And if, by the way, this is your lived experience, I would invite you, if you're on one of the platforms where there's chat, if you're on LinkedIn, or if you're using that USF.DEI cert hashtag on Twitter, share with us some of the actual questions your family has been asked in this situation. And we have to think now about what message that sends those children. What message does that send to those children? And again, if you're on LinkedIn right now, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'll be able to see that as to what message gets sent to those children. Someone asks the question, are they adopted? Are they yours? Where did you get them? Where did they come from? Is the father Black? What is the message that is sent to that children? Someone wrote, why are you here? And we're seeing the messages are things like, you're different. You're not the norm. You don't belong. It doesn't matter why the person is asking. It doesn't matter what their intentions are. The message is the same. And that message is, you are the other. It's the same message an Asian job applicant born in Texas gets when the manager asks what country he's from. Or the scientist who was always asked to explain the behavior of the members of her religion by her lab director whenever they're in the news. The person in the wheelchair when a random stranger just starts pushing them without being asked, which happens a lot more than you'd think. Is there a difference to that person in the wheelchair between the person who just wants to be helpful and the person who sees them as helpless? When it comes to biased behavior, your intentions don't matter. The only thing that matters is the outcomes your behavior creates. And there are people who think of themselves as so unbiased and pure of heart that of course they could ask that question or make the comment. That wouldn't have a biased outcome. Do you think it sounds any different to a 6-year-old who's already been bombarded with messages about her skin color and her hair and so many other aspects of her being when the question comes from somebody with a good heart who's curious, as opposed to somebody who is judging her based on her race? People with good hearts but curious are the ones who say, well, I don't even see color. If you use the phrase, I don't see color, or let's just say someone else in your life uses it, I strongly encourage you to remove it from everyone's vocabulary. First off, it's a complete lie. You do see color. Nobody sat at that table and didn't notice that that woman was white and the 3 children calling her mommy were black. But when we claim not to see color, we deny the lived experience of every person of color. We have to see color in order to embrace the beauty of diversity and do the work to ensure equality. Now, other phrases that are the same as I don't see color include things like, you can be black, white, or purple. It's all the same to me as long as you got the money. Tell that to the family trying to buy a house in a neighborhood where the police are called when they tour that house with their realtor. People say, it doesn't matter what anyone looks like as long as they can do the work. Tell that to the 110-pound woman applying for a job in a warehouse who is fully capable of doing the heavy lifting. Or, I just want the best person for the job. And I know a lot of people just went, what? How is that bias? How is that problematic? There is no deciding who is the best person for a job without the beliefs of the decider coming into play. And all kinds of unexamined, unintentional, implicit bias shows up in those measurements. When symphony orchestras were 90% male, the panels who ran auditions said, we can't help it, the men are just better musicians. But since auditions now take place behind a screen, hiding the identity of the auditioner, more than 40% of vacant seats in symphonies have been filled by women. Do women just play significantly better when they're behind a screen? Or do we get a more equitable outcome when the bias of the examiner is taken out of the equation? If you have a human brain, you naturally have bias. If you're taking notes, please write down, I have a human brain, therefore I have bias. If you watched my video prior to this, you'll understand why that is. You'll remember that your brain automatically triggers the release of cortisol. That's the stress hormone when you encounter anything or anyone you aren't expecting. So let's take the shame and judgment out of what we're going to talk about. Everyone with a human brain has bias, and we have to admit it openly, or we're never going to be able to address it. If you are feeling judged right now, that's the feeling I hope you can lose. We move forward a lot faster if everyone stops leading with protecting themselves and their positions. Take a deep breath. Deep breath dissipates cortisol. And drop your defenses. Be open to hearing things about your brain and your company and your community that have room for improvement. The biggest room in any house is the room for improvement. Today, I'm going to share tools you can use to outsmart your brain, to outsmart your unconscious bias, both in yourself and in your company. The fact that you're here means this is something you're striving to get right. So here's the first bit of discomfort for me to share in a session in which there's going to be a lot of really good discomfort because nobody grows inside their own comfort zone. There's no right. It's not a checklist. One person's, I'm okay with that, is another person's, I'm offended. And that's because races don't have feelings. Genders don't have beliefs. Sexual orientations don't have opinions. People have feelings and beliefs and opinions. Right now, think about your gender. Take 5 seconds to really drop into yourself and think about your gender. Is there a belief you hold that is held by every single person who identifies as your gender? What about your nationality? Your sexual orientation? If not, then why do we think that's true of anyone else? Seeing someone as a representative of their entire group instead of as a unique individual is a form of stereotyping. If you know that you hold a fundamental belief about an entire group of people, and here's an easy test. If someone from that group does something and you think, typical, catch that. That means you hold a belief about an entire group of people. whether positive or negative, if you hold a belief about an entire group of people, but you can get yourself to see just one person, just one individual from that group as different from what you believe about the rest of them, then guess what? Guess what? That is so much worse. Don't do that. That's as dangerous and damaging as any other form of bias. That's thinking of somebody as one of the good ones. And it's awful. When you think that way, they have no freedom to fail. And when you take that away, you take away creativity, you take away innovation, you take away attempts at success. Thomas Edison said, I never failed, I just had found 10,000 ways it wouldn't work. How many people in your world don't get 10,000 chances? How many don't even get 2? How many of us even know that the carbon filament that makes light bulbs work was actually perfected by Lewis Latimer, the son of escaped slaves who worked for Edison, but shared none of the wealth or fame generated by this invention? Why is my power company called why isn't my power company called Southern California Latimer instead of SoCal Edison? And one last point. The person you're judging based on a single aspect of their identity knows that you will hold your failure against everyone else who shares that aspect of their identity. This is called stereotyping syndrome, and it's a very real factor in workplace behavior. People stop trying when the consequences of their failure are so much greater and extend far beyond just themselves into their entire community. Think of the unfair burden that puts on someone to have to show up in a workplace every single day where they are already challenging the norms and then have to represent an entire gender or race or nationality or religion. I call this the Jackie Robinson standard. Jackie Robinson was the first Black baseball player to play in the major leagues. How did he have to behave? And if the chat were running, people would answer in the chat, and somebody eventually would say, he had to behave like the white players. No, he didn't. The white players could be as big of jerks as they wanted to be. Did Jackie Robinson have the freedom to charge the mound when he got hit by a pitch? When a ball got thrown straight at his head? And he got hit by pitches a lot. Or did he know that if he charged the mound even once, it would destroy not only the opportunity for him to play in the major leagues, but for everyone who looked like him to play in the major leagues? So ask yourself, who in my workplace is required to be perfect just to be seen as belonging? Who has to tamp down the emotions and reactions that the rest of us are allowed to express freely to keep everyone else comfortable? If you have a set of beliefs about a group of people, even something as harmless as thinking, of course, when somebody does something, you can't count on anyone from that group to change your mind or to prove you wrong, because as long as you believe what you do, they'll never be able to. They'll always just be seen as the exception or as one of the good ones. You have to work to eliminate judging everyone from a particular group in a way you would not want to be judged by the behavior of others in your group. If you can do this, you will get the best out of everyone. Treat each person as an individual. Give everyone the same freedom to fail. You will get the best out of the others around you, and being able to get the best out of others is the most valuable trait you can bring to any workplace. We don't have time today to cover a lot of the workplace values. So I made a worksheet you can download. It's called 5 Policies that Outsmart Unconscious Bias in Your Company. You can access that at speakhappiness.com/inclusion. Go there. You don't have to sign up for anything. It's just click on the link. It'll take you straight to the workplace. There's no cookies. You won't be tracked. And if you want to reach me for any reason, you can do that at inclusion@speakhappiness.com. Now, if you don't want the unconscious bias in your brain to show up in your workplace, here are 3 ways you can actively outsmart it. First, sponsor your highest potential performers. Sponsor means you speak up for someone when they're not in the room. Be the champion who gets them considered for that promotion, or the goalkeeper who stops them from getting relegated to the low-level scut work that only seems to get assigned to the people who look like them. Pay attention to who gets the juicy assignments and who's assigned the menial tasks. And if there is a bias in that, or even there appears to be a bias in that, speak up. Be the one who says, I will not let this happen to other people. If you see a pattern, be the person who stops it, and especially sponsor people who don't have anyone who looks like them at your level. No one advances in their careers without someone who sponsors them. The other way people advance in their careers is by having access to the boss. Examine how that happens and make sure it's neutral for everybody. As one of our previous panels, Heba mentioned, is it over drinks after work? Is access to the boss over drinks after work? Who does that exclude? Drop in your chat, if you're on LinkedIn, who does that exclude? Well, for sure, it excludes parents. It absolutely excludes single parents. It excludes non-drinkers. It excludes Muslims and Mormons and other people whose religious beliefs don't permit them to drink. It excludes people who are sober and maybe don't want the boss to know that. It excludes people who can't afford to go out for drinks. Drinks are expensive. And people also don't want the boss to know that if their money is tight. Also, for some people, rumors might get started about them if they go out for drinks with the boss. The kinds of rumors that will follow them throughout their careers and hurt them. So equal access has to happen in neutral ways. It can be over breakfast in a public place where the boss is picking up the check, or over lunch in a public place where the boss is picking up the check. What about access that happens through some physical activity, like a pickup game of basketball or a round of golf? Who does that exclude? Access to leadership has to be equally available to all. And if, as the CEO of a company I was working with on this issue said to me, can't boys just be boys? I said, yes, boys can be boys, but not when decisions are being made. If you want to go play a pickup game of basketball, great, as long as that doesn't exclude anybody from being considered for a promotion or being included in decisions about corporate policies. You can't discuss policies during the executive poker game if certain executives aren't included. Decisions cannot be made and relationships should not be forged in spaces where anyone is unwelcome or even made to feel unwelcome. That's why we don't have retreats at plantations. That's why your bonding exercise had better not be rock climbing. When a workplace is not inclusive, who do you lose first? Think for a moment. When your workplace is not inclusive, who do you lose first? And I see the standard. Yeah, the best people. You lose your best performers. You lose the people with options. You lose the people who are getting calls from headhunters every week. The moment they feel not included or don't have access to the boss, when they hear that there was a poker game Friday night and a policy was formed they weren't included on, that's when they're going to take that call from that headhunter. And the next thing is amplify the voices of people whose contributions are not being acknowledged. Those who are ignored or interrupted or talked over in meetings. It sounds like this. Carol just mentioned a different testing model, and I'd like us to discuss that further. Or, I don't think Jamal was finished with his point, and I want to hear what he was saying. When you amplify someone else, you don't repeat what they said, you guide the conversation back to them so that they will be listened to, so that they will be heard. Doing this will make your team so much more effective because the value of diversity isn't from different body parts or different skin color or different heritage. It's from different thought processes. You want to hear from everyone, especially the people who think differently from you. There are 2 malls in Los Angeles where I live that are beautiful. One is Hollywood and Highland and the other is Santa Monica Place. And I will not shop at either of them. See, the women's restroom at Santa Monica Place is down a long, poorly lit hallway directly off the parking lot. And at Hollywood and Highland, the women's restroom is down next to the elevator, down a long hallway. You go left, and there's the men's restroom, and you go further down that hallway and go left to get to the women's restroom. When I told my husband that that's why I don't shop at those places, he said, well, wait, don't women want more privacy when they go to the bathroom? And I said, no, women want to not be sexually assaulted in a part of the mall that's so isolated nobody can hear them scream. Santa Monica Place was designed by Frank Gehry, but there was a massive redesign done by a designer named David. And I don't know who was the specific designer who designed Hollywood and Highland, but the principals at the firm are Stanton, Matthew, Peter, William, James, Barry, Sean, Douglas, and Ming, who was a man. I don't know if any women had a voice in that design process for a mall. Think about that for a second. But I do know that when I go to either of those places as a woman, I don't feel safe. That's why you have to make sure you're hearing from everyone. That's why you must amplify voices in our companies so that costly mistakes aren't made. How costly? Hollywood and Highland is being completely revamped after being open less than 20 years. They built them all as an homage to Hollywood, meaning they had the entire history of Hollywood and every movie ever made to choose from. And they decided to base the entire mall's design on a D.W. Griffith movie called Intolerance, which was the movie he made in response to how angry he was that the NAACP was protesting his other movie, Birth of a Nation, widely regarded to be the most racist movie in history and credited with revitalizing the Klan. And the optics of that at Hollywood and Highland finally became too much. So after less than 2 decades, they are ripping out the entire design and starting over. This isn't trivial. It includes removing 40-foot high concrete elephants that are on 3-story tall pedestals. But let's move past the monetary cost of that for a second. According to their press kit, 25 million people visit Hollywood and Highland annually. So let's do a little math. If mall visitors reflect the US population, and I don't know why they wouldn't, then 13.4% of them are Black. And if just 1% of those visitors know who D.W. Griffith is, that means that every year more than 33,000 men, women, and children walk into a space that they soon discover is a tribute to the man who is largely responsible for the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan. How welcoming does that space feel? What kind of trauma does that impose? What does that do to their dream vacation to Hollywood? Again, we have to ask, whose voice wasn't in the room when that decision was made? One thing you can do to sponsor, neutralize, and amplify is to recognize when someone is being treated differently in your workplace and speak up. Pay attention to who isn't getting invited to lunch with executives, who doesn't have the same support from subordinates, who gets more pushback from clients, whose expertise or knowledge is questioned at a disproportionate level when someone else's is just accepted. Remember, you don't get innovation unless everyone is given the same freedom to fail. But more than that, it is exhausting to always have to prove your intelligence and prove your competence and prove your worth, especially when others around you don't have to. And that level of exhaustion is unsustainable. So you will lose the people who have to put up with it. And who do you lose first? The people with the most options. We all have a need and an obligation to look at these issues and examine the part we play in them, regardless of our own backgrounds. I grew up poor in a small town in southern Indiana where one of the largest social clubs was the Klan, and my maiden name is Horwitz. So I know what it's like to be at the other end of discrimination. I know what it's like to be at the other end of a hate crime and victimized twice when the authorities took the side of the perpetrators. But those things don't cancel out the enormous privilege I experience because of the color of my skin, the country I was born in, the language I speak, my cisgendered able-bodiedness. I know what it's like to be the only person of my religion in the room. I know what it's like to be the only woman in the room. I was an investment banker. But I have no idea what it's like to be the only person of color in a room, to be the only immigrant in a room, to be the only person in a wheelchair in a room. So when someone with that lived experience comes to me and says, what you did hurt me, what you said diminished me, your actions limited my opportunities, my only response is to say, tell me more. I'm listening, and I promise I will work to do better. What I cannot do is try to justify my behavior or explain my intentions, because intentions don't matter, only outcomes. I had the opportunity to put this into practice this week. Everyone was asked to watch my talk, How to Outsmart Your Own Unconscious Bias. We did that because time here is so limited, and that would have laid a groundwork that we could get beyond. But after watching it, one of the members of this class sent me an email and included this, which I'm going to read. I appreciated your perspective, but did want to ask you to reconsider your use of the ancient Chinese blessing, which was paired with an image of a fortune cookie. Given the recent national attention on anti-Asian sentiment and hate crimes, I wanted to make sure you were aware that this is absolutely not an ancient Chinese blessing, nor are fortune cookies to be found in any kind of Chinese restaurant in China. All this did was immediately signal to me that this talk would not be for me, that something vaguely attributed to Asians was again being used to signal exoticism and relegate me to being a perpetual foreigner. I, of course, had the immediate cortisol response to that, flooding into my bloodstream. I was angry at being called out. I was fear of being canceled. Then I took a deep breath and I stepped back from her email and I processed what she was sharing with me. First, a quick Wikipedia search revealed that the phrase I quoted as an ancient Chinese blessing in all likelihood was made up by Joseph Chamberlain, father of the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, in 1898, and their family is who referred to it as a Chinese curse. Why didn't I catch that 4 years ago? That talk you watched was rigorously verified. I had to provide research for every scientific fact shared in it. More than 30 people saw the talk before it was delivered with that verification standard in mind, and not one of us thought to question the origin of that saying or to think that that was a fact that needed to be verified. That's the outcome of unconscious bias, not even thinking to check. And then I paired it with a fortune cookie. When I spoke to the woman who sent the email to thank her, because as Dean Lamayev said, feedback is the greatest gift we can ask for. And I let her know I wanted to hear more. She elaborated and she referred to this image as a cultural shortcut. I didn't understand that, so she explained those are images and music cues that you'll see in media that are used to signify otherness or foreignness and that erase all of the cultural relevance of that image or that sound. I am so grateful to have been called out on my bias and to have learned that. And sending that email took enormous courage on her part. But there was another part of her email that questioned my use of the word ninja. She asked, I have to wonder if the same effect could have been achieved by substituting spy or secret agent and left out the fetishizing of that aspect of Asian culture. That one isn't so clear-cut to me, and she and I talked about it at length. The word ninja in the talk was used to show that as a woman working in tech, I'd simultaneously become highly dangerous and invisible. In talking this out, both with my equity and inclusion peer group and with my writers group, we could not come up with a word that so perfectly conveyed the invisibility combined with the perception of danger that is inflicted on so many non-majority groups when we find ourselves in spaces traditionally occupied by the majority. I know there are people from all communities in this class right now thinking, this is crazy. I had no problem with any of that. but none of us gets to decide what might be problematic for someone else. All we can do is listen. Is the use of the word ninja cultural appropriation of a traditional Japanese warrior? Or has it transitioned into also being a word in the English language that means a stealth threat? I'm here to tell you right now, I don't know. If we're going to continue evolving, we have to embrace complexity. But complexity is a source of chaos, and human brains really don't like chaos. As my new friend who sent the email said, in chaos, your brain can't do a proper threat assessment. Am I still at risk of being canceled for referring to myself as a ninja? Maybe. And I couldn't even say whether that would be right or wrong. But I want us to have these conversations. We don't get growth without growing pains. We have to be open to the idea that the same thing can simultaneously be both questionable and evolutionary. If white British teenagers didn't love Black American blues music, we wouldn't have the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin. But we can't ignore the fact that the originators of that music never reaped the financial rewards because the white power structure of the music industry siloed their music and only marketed it to a limited audience. So all the wealth went to those who were inspired by it or outright stole it. That is the worst form of cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation and cultural evolution often look the same, and we don't solve that by becoming more divided. But we must work to ensure each group is able to reap the largest benefits of the culture they bring. Another aspect of stereotyping is telling people what they can't do because of what they look like or where they come from, which is why I don't agree with telling anybody to stay in your lane. But we have to be really aware of who might be zooming across all the lanes, blocking everyone else's progress for their own benefit. Should I be the person brought in to talk about unconscious bias? Some people from certain communities say, no way, it's not your journey. And others from those same communities will say, thank God we're not the only ones talking about this. And both of those views are right. This is where we must embrace complexity and celebrate the messy, chaotic beauty of diversity. If a Nigerian chef moves to the United States and tastes Brazilian food for the first time and falls in love with it, I want to eat at her restaurant. I can't wait to taste feijoada made with uziza. I want to hear rock and roll music played on a sitar, and I want to hear a traditional Indian raga played on a Stratocaster. I want to see a rap-based musical on Broadway about the founding of America where Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington are played by Black men, because for the first time ever, the best person for the job actually got it. And maybe next time they'll be played by Asian women or transgender Muslims. It's a new day, a day where we stop looking for easy answers and we hear the voices that have too long been silenced, where we stop looking for people in our workplaces to be a culture fit and seek out and celebrate those who are a culture add, where we all agree to bear the discomfort of progress, to create safe spaces, not for ourselves to continue thinking we're fine because we don't have racist or sexist or prejudiced intentions, but for others to share their diverse perspectives with us so that we may hold ourselves accountable for the inadvertent racist and sexist and prejudiced outcomes our behavior creates, and our society creates, and our history creates. Remember, intentions don't matter, only outcomes. To move forward, we must focus on the outcomes, not the intentions or the guilt or the moral judgments, but to look at the landscape of what is and ask, how do we get to where we want to be? And then take the difficult, strenuous, sometimes treacherous journey of self-examination it takes to get there. And it's already happened. It's already happened. I'll prove it to you. Together, let's do a visualization. Everyone, please close your eyes and take a deep breath. And now imagine you're meeting with new neighbors who just bought the house next door. Picture an interview with the ideal candidate to work on your team. Visualize your state swearing in a new governor. Now, open your eyes and share on whatever platform you can, LinkedIn or Twitter, or just with the people around you. Share right now. Did you just expand your view of what's normal? If so, see, I promised you'd experience evolution. And all you had to do was opt in. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, Valerie. This is Alexis again, and I am very, very fortunate to be able to join in our instructional piece, to be joined by Tony Kong, a wonderful colleague of mine. Don't you love these visuals? And Cecil Howard, who is a wonderful, wonderful colleague as well. There it is. There he is. Thank you so much. So as we transition into our instructional piece, I know we've run over a bit, but we are willing to stay over if you'd like us to for some Q&A. So we're going to start today in our instructional video by talking about stereotypes and biases. Hi, Tony. Hi, Cecil. So nice to see you. So next slide, please. We're going to talk about decisions, right? We make decisions about others based on what we initially see. Valerie talked to us about that. We actually saw it directly from our panel earlier. And so to those ends, I want to show you, next slide, please, Xian, what the financial impact can be around stereotypes and stigmas and prejudices that are suffered by people of color and people of disability and people who are just in protected and marginalized groups. So this segment here, this slide here shows you the median household net worth for whites as opposed to Asians, as opposed to Hispanic, as opposed to Black. This is the situation. And this is what we're here to try to illuminate in terms of how we're going to go and fix this, right? And so next, I'm going to have Cecil talk to us about what this could mean, right? And what is it that we are doing or not doing to contribute to this circumstance. Next slide, please.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Alexis, for this opportunity. And before I even get started saying anything, I mean, Valerie was just outstanding, wasn't she? And I picked up a lot of information that I might actually use some of that during this segment here. So I think I should do pretty good on my quiz later on tonight. But you know, you were talking, Alexis, earlier with one or two slides earlier about how people make decisions about us based on what they see. And I gotta admit, when I was closing my eyes and I was visualizing this neighbor and visualizing all these people making these decisions, I started thinking about what I normally think about and what I normally see, as opposed to really expanding my whole concept and idea and vision of what I could see. So I just want to again thank her about that. But when we look at people, you know, it's really tantamount to looking at an iceberg. You know, when we see an iceberg, for instance, really what we see is only about 10% of that iceberg above the surface of the water, only about 10%. What we don't realize, though, is 90% of it is well beneath the water, well beneath the surface of the water, so much so that there could be a whole lot going on. And if we're not careful, and we've seen movies about that, right? The Titanic and all those. If we're not careful, then we may hit that iceberg, and then of course there could be danger. Same thing with people. Same thing with people. When you see me, you might think that you see a black male. That's probably, you might think, well, I think he's a black guy, at least color wise. And we know that's construct anyway. And I think he's a male. That's probably it. Until I open my mouth, however, you might not even know my language. So you're not going to know a whole lot about me, just meeting me, just seeing me, just kind of coming into a space in which I'm existing. However, a lot of decisions are made just based on the tip of the iceberg. That's all you've seen, and you've already made all those decisions. You've already started judging me. You've started formulating in your mind some beliefs about me. You've already started thinking about some biases that you harbor against my kind, right? So it's important to make sure that you can see beyond those. And that's what the whole hope here is, because there could be some consequences, and we're going to talk about those. But when you see me getting on the elevator, for instance, and you're thinking, oh gosh, do I hold my purse? Do I stand on one side of the elevator? Thank God there's social distancing now in the elevators that has little dots and spots for us to sit on, stand on. Or do you just kind of just look up at the floors and just pray to God that, Lord, hurry up, let's let this elevator hurry up and get there. I mean, all of those things go through your mind. What a lot of people are not realizing is that one who has probably been stereotyped in many instances, I'm thinking that you're thinking the same thing. So I'm praying that this elevator hurry up gets to the top floor as well. We were doing all this social distancing way before all of the coronavirus and everything associated with it. So I'm maintaining my social distance as well, because I don't want you to put yourself in a position where you are in fear of me because of some stereotype that you're harboring against me. So when the effort, though, within the workplace is made to engage people, to understand people, to get to know them, as opposed to just making these decisions, then you start to get beneath the surface of the water. Then you get into that 90%. Then you start to formulate bonds. You start to formulate friendships and relationships such that now you can make more informed decisions. When you don't, that leads you to this phenomenon that I refer to as our three-headed monster.
Next slide, please.
Let's talk about that. So the three-headed monster is based on three phenomena. One, the stereotypes. Stereotypes, and those are what we refer to as beliefs. Those are things that we may have learned some time ago. Some of us learned them at the kitchen table. Yeah, some of us heard parents talk about them, heard our older siblings talk about them, heard friends talk about them, friends even at church, friends at school, friends down at the country club. We heard those and we started believing them. We started believing, well, if there's a new black guy, and make sure you lock your purse up. He may steal your purse. Okay, he may cause a fight, or he may, if you're the only one there in the building at night, you better be careful. He may rape you. I mean, those are all stereotypical views that are held, and they're the norm. They're the norm. I'll tell you, I've done many different types of presentations and group type or interventions, interactions rather, regarding stereotypes, and to hear people talk about the stereotypes, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So, but many of the people who are impacted by those, they also understand what those stereotypes are. So again, like I talked about with the elevator, they're going to try to do something to make sure you don't put yourself in a position to become harmed or feel harmful about what's going on there. So those are your beliefs. Those are, I firmly believe that this is going to happen. And then you have prejudice and bias. This typically is the result of stereotypes. Well, let me talk about our friend Jamal. I think I heard Valerie mention Jamal as well. Jamal's a popular guy here in this space. So let's talk about our friend Jamal. Jamal, he works, he has a job, works at a company, and he's interested in getting a promotion. And the one promotion that he's been interested in, an opening comes up. Jamal decides he wants to apply for the position. Here's the problem. Rick, a white guy, says, well, you know, one thing I know about a lot of the blacks are they like to party, and they especially like to party on Sunday evenings. What is it about going to the park on Sunday night and partying until the wee hours of the night, wee hours of the morning, really, to 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning? What is it about that such that you get in and go home late Sunday night or really early Monday morning, and then can't get up to come to work Monday morning? That's a perception. That's a stereotype. I don't think it happens much, but that is a stereotype, a stereotypical view. Well, because of that, Rick says, you know what? I know this is the type of thing that Jamal does in his free time. And for that reason, I know this is the thing blacks do in their free time. And for that reason, I don't like to work with blacks, and I don't like to hire blacks. So already we've dealt with stereotypes. This is what they do. And then we've dealt with prejudice and bias. I don't like them because this is what they do. So now we've got a problem. Rick is exercising all the privileges in the world to utilize these stereotypes and these prejudices. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. And this is why this is so important. And this is why we in various workforces have to make sure that we rid ourselves of these stereotypical views and these prejudicial and bias-laden viewpoints, because they lead to the granddaddy of them all, discrimination. So he says, okay, I know blacks like to party at night and like to stay up all night long. 1, I don't like them because of that. 2, now as a result, I'm going to engage in behavior. I'm going to take action. Now we're talking discrimination. As a result, I'm not going to give Jamal this position, no matter how qualified he is, because I don't want to hear every Monday morning Jamal saying he can't come into work. So now he's engaged in first-class, first-hand discrimination, which he's probably going to get in a lot of trouble. So what Jamal then does is decide, well, you know what? I feel I've been discriminated against. I am now going to, let's go to the next page. I am now going to, next page, please. I am now going to go to the EEOC. Yeah, we can stay there. I am now going to go to the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. I am now going to file a complaint against you, Rick, because you made a decision against me. You engaged in discriminatory behavior based primarily on your stereotypical views and the bias you held against people in my group or people that look like me. You made a decision. So now we need to deal with this. We need to address this issue. So he files his action against the EEOC. He files an action with the EEOC, not against, but with the EEOC. Well, here's the thing now. The company is now in big trouble. You know why? Because if you look at the statistics right there, the EEOC accepts over 60, last year in 2020, they accepted over 67,000 cases. That's just the EEOC. That's not the various state agencies. That's not the various local governments. That is just the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It's probably 2 to 3 times that many that were filed in other respects. And of course, there's probably 10 times that amount that were not filed at all. But even with the 67,000, they secured over $431 million for individuals against companies. Now, this is where it hurts. Talk about the bottom line, talk about the business case, talk about the impact. You're now talking about just from the EEOC portions of the cases they accept, they secured $439 million. Jamal is about to get paid. As a matter of fact, the company probably is going to end up paying about $250,000 just on Jamal's case. Suppose the job was only going to be a $50,000 job a year. They probably are going to pay about $250,000. That's the average. That's the average. So that's what the impact is of this action taken against him. Now let me just say this though. Apart with the three-headed monster, to stereotype somebody is not necessarily against the law. You think blacks just like to party all the time. To hold and harbor prejudicial views against them is not necessarily against the law. You think, well, I just don't like them. There's no law that says you shall like blacks. There's no law out there. But then when you engage in that third one, now you are engaging in the discriminatory action, now illegal discriminatory action. That's what's going to bring us to this page here, where somebody is going to be paying some money. Jamal is going to put some money in his pocket, and he may in fact be able to party all night after he leaves the EEOC because of the situation here. And then I'll end with this before I move on from this page. This is a big thing that we see in many, many different companies, many different employment situations. Now Rick is upset with Jamal. The nerve of him, the audacity of him to file a complaint against us. As good as we've been to him, we've heard that. As good as we've been to him, the nerve of him. Well, you know what? Now we're really upset with him. Not only did he not get the role, we're firing him. You're gone, Jamal, out of here. Well, guess what? Company A just got a new lawsuit against them for retaliation. Retaliation is easier to prove than discrimination. So now Jamal is in hog heaven, as some would say, because he has a much easier case now to show that all he did was opposed discrimination by filing that complaint against them. And this is what happened. And let me just make this point about retaliation because it's so important. And oftentimes when I talk with companies and talk with employers doing training, they don't even realize it. Some people firmly believe that when a person files a charge against the company with the EEOC or some other type of anti-discrimination agency, if they lose the case, some people believe, oh, well, see, I told you there was nothing. Now he lost the case. Now we can fire him. And then they'll go and fire him. You cannot do that. All Jamal had to do was file the case. As long as he filed the case, it's not the outcome that matters. It's the fact that he did oppose discrimination and filed the case. So that's what makes this case a lot easier. And I'll tell you this, last thing on this one. Typically, when the underlying charge fails, where there's no merit to be found with the underlying charge, retaliation tends to prevail. That's why you see retaliation as the number one claim filed with the EEOC, followed behind disability, and then race. Race for a long time was number one, but you see race has been relegated to number three. But don't miss out on retaliation, and certainly do not miss out on disability. Those are the things that are catching our employers, and that's what's bringing them to a position of having to pay about $250,000 per case. So let's move on, next page. So now what we have here are what we refer to, or what's commonly referred to as stereotypes, common stereotypes. Now, these are not stereotypes that we thought of. These are generally held stereotypes. Many of them I've compiled over the years from just engaging in training and talking to groups of people. And they love to have those type of trainings anyway, when you just give them the opportunity continually just to throw them out. They love that.
So I want you to read off these stereotypes, but first I want to ask all of the participants to look at your screen and look at the tiny URL.com/USF poll and put that on your phone or your computer, or use your phone and scan that QR code at the bottom of the screen so that you can participate in this poll. So Cecil, tell them what they need to do.
Yes, so I will go ahead and read them off, and you will see that each has a letter by it. And all you need to do is just put in the letter that you believe is a stereotype you may have engaged in. Yeah, that you may have engaged in. It's not going to come back to you. You're not going to be tested on it. Trust me on this one. Just put in the letter. A, blacks are good at sports. B, blacks are great dancers. C, men are strong and do all the work. D, women aren't as smart as men. E, men who spend too much time on the computer or read are geeks.
That's Asian men. I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm assuming everybody, if you can't, I'm reading this because I know everybody can read, but I'm reading it in case it's too small for anybody to see. Is that okay?
Yes.
F, all Black women are very angry, are so angry rather. G, all blondes are unintelligent. H, the elderly has health issues and behave like children. I, all Arabs and Muslims are terrorists. J, darker skinned people are unacceptable. K, all Jews are stingy. L, all Asians are good at math. M, all Irish people are drunks and eat potatoes. I, women, I'm sorry, L, M, something's,
yes.
I, women are only concerned about physical appearance, and N, older people don't know technology. So if you could select one, if you have engaged in those stereotypes or held a belief into one of those stereotypes, then certainly vote, and we will see it in the word cloud real soon and give you an indication on what is most popular and most prevalent amongst this particular group here. So I'm reading off to give you time to get it in. Are we going to look at that now? I can barely see.
Yes.
It. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I'm looking to see what's happening. Shihan, your technology is showing to everyone in the world right now. So we're talking about stereotypes, right? So I'm going to start by being a bit provoking and talk to you about, and so have an engage rather in a conversation with my colleagues around what stereotypes look like and feel like. So Tony, did you want to start by asking me a question?
Sure. So here are just some examples about stereotypes or microaggressive statements we typically make in the workplace. And because these are so common, it may resonate with your own experience. Alexis, why are all Black women so angry?
So first of all, Tony, I don't represent all Black women, and my work experiences make me angry sometimes. And the question that comes to me all the time as to why I'm so angry hurts me, makes my workplace experience difficult, makes it very hard for me to lead, and is highly problematic. Well, I'll turn it around on you, Tony. So, you know, why are Asians good at math? And I have a lot of Asian friends. So how do you feel about that?
First, I appreciate that you have a large circles of friends, but you don't have to emphasize they are all Asians. You know, the Asian population in the United States actually is a pretty diverse one. Asian Americans can actually trace their cultural roots to more than 20 countries in Asia, and each with unique histories and cultures. So I appreciate your big friendship network, but you don't have to emphasize they are all Asians.
Point taken, Tony, thank you.
So, you know, Black people are also very good at things too. They're very athletic, I know, and then they're also very good dancers.
Well, you know, Tony, that's typical stereotyping. I mean, everybody likes dancing and everybody likes athletics. Blacks are also good at, and so Blacks are good at those things too, but they're also good at science. They're good at technology. They're good at business. They're good at industry, good at leading people. They're good at politics, good at leading countries in this world. So Blacks are good at a lot of things. So when people say that they're just good at dancing and good at entertainment, good at dancing and sports, they just want entertainment. That's all they want. And sometimes they're only accepted just for that. Our goal is to make sure they're accepted for their brain and the other parts of their brain that will allow them to engage in other aspects of this world and the life that we live in.
Thank you, Cecil. So we're going to go and we're going to bring up this slide again. And we're going to start, have Tony talk to us about microaggressive statements and what they look like and how they feel. Thank you so much, Shihan. Next slide.
first, briefly, I just want to clarify the difference between aggression and microaggression, because microaggression is so common in the workplace. So it's important to understand the difference between these two. So aggression refers to a behavior carried out with the immediate intention to cause harm on another individual who's trying to avoid the behavior or the harm. And it can be verbal or nonverbal. And aggression definitely is intentional, not accidental. Someone is doing it on purpose. And aggression can be hostile, emotional, impulsive, or instrumental, deliberate, and proactive. So when aggression causes extreme harm, then it becomes violence. On the other side, a microaggression is an indirect, sometimes subtle put down toward a person from a marginalized community, often wrapped up in what pretends to be a compliment, just like what we did in the role play. It's pretty brief. It's very common in the workplace. It can be verbal or nonverbal, even through emotional expression or body language. And typically it's hostile, derogatory, and a negative to the person you speak to. Next slide, please. So here are some common statements, and then we heard some of them already in the role play. So let me ask you, Alexis, if someone tells you you don't look even black, or you don't even seem black, how would you react to this? What's on your mind?
It offends me, and it comes across as an ignorant statement, because Black people are from the lightest to the darkest, and they are beautiful from the beginning from the top to the bottom. And it makes me want to educate people about the nuances of being Black and the beauty of being Black, actually.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Cecil? If someone tells you, I don't see color.
Well, when they tell me they don't see color, then that tells me they're not seeing me, because I'm of color and we're all of color. You cannot marginalize someone and deminimize who they are just based on what their race is. Maybe what they're trying to say is I don't make my distinctions against people or for people based on their race or whatever the case may be. Well, they need to be very clear about what it is they're trying to articulate to you. But everybody sees color. Everybody sees those differences. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those differences and then respect those differences and find ways that we can bind and come together in a much better situation as a result of those differences. But to act as if they don't exist is just not feasible at this time.
Yeah, next slide. So women tend to be the targets for microaggressive statements. And when someone says to a woman, she won't be able to travel for work, what it really says is being a woman keeps her from fully participating in the workforce. And she will leave as soon as she has a child. To people who typically stereotype as perpetual foreigners in the US, like me, this question definitely is not foreign to any of them. No, where are you really from? And this question really conveys to these individuals, including me, that you are not American. People like you are not real Americans. So finally, when someone said, whoa, that's so gay, to a member of LGBTQ community, what it really says is being gay is not acceptable or desirable. And it is weird for someone to behave in a feminine way. So these are just some common examples of microaggressive statements. And there are a lot more, as you can imagine, in the workforce. Many of you are probably victims of microaggressive statements, and we would love to hear your stories and personal experiences, and we are here to listen. So please feel free to share your experience and stories with us at your convenience. And to everyone, please remember that language is powerful. It can hurt people, it can help people. Microaggressive statements really can hurt people, even though you have a good intention. Think about the impact of your words on others. Please be respectful and considerate when you communicate with anyone at work. You can make a positive impact with your words. Next, Alexis will introduce some solutions to the problems that we have about stereotypes and discrimination.
Thank you so much, Tony and Cecil. Next slide, please, Shihan. So obviously, we talked about some microaggressive statements, and so there are ways to not make or to replace those microaggressive statements. So if someone says you can succeed if you try hard enough, what would be more appropriate it would be to say, I believe you can do it. Or if we're going to take, you can speak English very well, instead of saying such a thing, you should probably think about saying you communicate effectively. Next slide, please. But we're here to provide some solutions, right? So the first thing that we believe that you should do in the workplace, and Valerie intimated this, and so did our panel, is to inquire. So for the table who aren't at the table, educate yourself about people who are different from you. And ask yourself and others why they aren't there with you. An important statement to make is to absorb that everyone's experiences are different, even when they are from the same group. So again, as an African-American woman, I do not represent all African-American women. There's so many of us out here in this world, so many beautiful ones out here in this world. And so to expect me to respond on behalf of all of them is not fair to them. And it constitutes sort of ignorance about who we are. And that's the same for every group that is marginalized. And we heard it earlier from our guests, refrain from asking intrusive and personal questions. That is very important because asking those questions suggest that we have to situate ourselves in ways that make other people comfortable. And that's not necessarily acceptable. It's not acceptable at all. Next slide, please. So voices, Valerie said it. And so for the people who aren't at the table, and actually Miguel said it first, listen to them. Please speak up on their behalf. Share your resources with them and amplify their voices. What do I mean by that as an example? If I have turned in a report to my leadership that was authored by someone on my team, it is important that I attribute credit to that person, to my leadership, so that they know that I'm not doing everything alone, right? And so also show your support to them, acknowledge them, and make them understand that you're always there for them. And then invite them to the table, but that's not enough. Make sure they're heard at that table. So again, Valerie intimated this earlier. Let them speak. And when they're being spoken over, make people stop and say, no, you've interrupted these people. They have something to say. So next slide, please. Tokenism. So a lot of people experience tokenism, and so I'm going to start by defining it. It's a word that's used to describe when a person who is a member of an oppressed group is used as a token of diversity at an institution or organization. Tokenism is checking a box, and that's not fair to your organization, and it is not fair to the person who is checking that box for you. And so there's some steps to mitigate tokenism, right? So spend time getting to know your team and your colleagues and find out what their individual strengths are, right? So then you're not just making a summary statement about one person checking off boxes for you on a regular basis. Get to know everyone on your team and ascribe credit and distribute those strengths across the organization. Clearly communicate roles and responsibilities. And so make sure that people know what is expected, what you expect of them, and what they can expect from you. And so those are two ways to address tokenism. The third one is empowerment in decision-making, and i.e. delegated authority. So in my case, I have a wonderful group of people who work with me, and I delegate authority to them, and I trust them because I empower them to make decisions. And the last point I want to make on tokenism is this idea of inclusive networking. So welcome your staff, provide a welcoming environment to them so that they feel that they can bring their best selves to the workplace and to you. So thank you. So next slide, Shihan. So then you have to champion diversity. This is why we're here. This is what we're talking about from Module 1 through Module 7. Believe in the importance of diversity.
But Alexis, suppose nobody else accepts that, though. I mean, you believe it, but what if nobody else accepts it? Then how do we deal with that?
So conversation, listening, and all of the steps, all and other steps that we're going to be going over through this module will help us, right? In terms of understanding the importance of diversity. What you've illuminated is the risk of not having diversity, right? And the cost of not having a diverse workforce. And so with all of these variables, we are positioning everyone on this call, in this meeting, to understand the liability around diversity and to do something to change the landscape in workspaces. Also, we should be able to clearly articulate the importance of diversity. So once we believe it, then we spread the word, right? From the top all the way down, and from down all the way up, to make sure that people understand that diversity is important. And in order to have a successful business model, you have to have diversity. Another one is to remove cues that trigger worries about stereotypes, right? But one that's most important is to recognize your power. We all have power. Moaz Lamayam said it at the beginning when we are all CEOs. And so you, as a person, irrespective of where you lie in leadership, have an opportunity to change the landscape in the workplace by looking at people differently and bringing them to the table, recognizing their talent, and making sure that they're successful because of you. And you have the power to do that. One thing that I will state is that you have to acknowledge and investigate reports of microaggressions and discrimination.
I gotta tell you, Alexis, people are afraid. People are very afraid to do that.
Understood, but you've explained this idea of what happens when you don't acknowledge or investigate those reports. So first of all, when someone has come to you with a report, understand and know that it has taken bravery and a lot of pain to come forward and talk to you about what they're going through. And if someone has done that, there's a likelihood that there is truth in their statements, and to ignore those and to not investigate them puts your organization at risk. And so you absolutely must acknowledge and invest those reports of microaggressions and discrimination. And if nothing comes of those investigations, at the very least, you will have done what you were supposed to do as a responsible leader, as a responsible manager.
Amen.
And lastly, be inclusive in all aspects of communication. So from the written word to the verbal word, to your gestures, to your eye rolls, to anything that you are doing, understand that you have to be inclusive. You have to understand that your being and your method of communication can actually make your organization better and can make a workplace more comfortable and welcoming and inclusive to people who don't look like you and to people who don't have the same life experiences as you do. Next slide. So what are our takeaways? Tony, did you want to go over those takeaways for us?
Sure. So first, we talk about the cost of stereotypes, bias, and the discrimination in the workplace. It's costly to be prejudicial. It's costly to be discriminatory. So stereotypes, watch your stereotypes, be mindful of your behavioral tendency because it can cost your company money. Second, we talk about the three-headed monsters, stereotypes, bias, prejudice, and the discrimination. It's important to distinguish among these three concepts because oftentimes people lump them together and just call it bias. Third, the difference between aggressions and microaggressions. Microaggressions are typically very brief and very subtle, but they can cause a long-term damage to the people who are from marginalized communities. And common microaggressive statements, and we give you some examples through our role play and also through the table. And if you want more resources, we also provide that in our module. And finally, the solutions to problems of stereotype, bias, prejudice, and discrimination. And we only provide some solutions, but if you're happy to get more resources about specific problems to your company, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will be more than happy to help you and provide some advice for you. So again, this is a partnership between you and us, and we will love to hear your stories and help you out.
Thank you. So I know that we've run over some, but if you're willing, we are happy to stay on and answer some of your questions. So the question is, I feel invisible and powerless in my organization. What can I do to make my leader listen to me? What do you think? Cecil, would you like to tackle that?
Yes, love to. One, I think it's important to make sure you find and identify somebody has to be in your organization. Someone has to exist within your organization whose purpose and role and part of what they do is to assist individuals who may be having these challenges that you've indicated. So you've got to identify who that individual is, and that person should be a confidential individual. So what goes on and what's said and stated should stay right there. It should not go anywhere else. So hopefully you do have that individual within your company. If so, you should be able to express yourself. And then that person should be put you in a position to give you some options or discuss some options that you may have in terms of what you want to do. I will tell you, as I've said, and as I kind of interjected with Alexis there, and that was by design, folks, that people are so afraid. People are so afraid to they will remain invisible. They will remain powerless because they're so afraid to even discuss and find and identify who that leader is. Find that person, discuss with that person, and let that person give you some options that you might consider in terms of what it is you're doing. If it's something that's harmful to you, for instance, assault or something to that effect, or even something a little less than that, then we're talking some serious stuff here, and you've got to report it. But if it's just somebody is just ignoring you or cutting you off when you talk, engaging in those microaggressions that Tony talked about, then I think there should be some opportunity for you to have some kind of a discussion with that person.
What I wanted to also add is that people you have to be confident about what you know, why you're there, and you should be able to engage with the person by asking, or by saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm good at, this is why I love being in this organization, and I really love to get past you not seeing me. I really love the opportunity to be able to grow, and I'm seeking your assistance to do so. And it's really hard to say no to a statement like that, but it takes confidence and ownership of who you are and what you know and what you can contribute to your organization.
I will also add, because usually such a kind of conversation is a difficult conversation. So on the manager side, companies should also provide training for those difficult conversations, like how to conduct difficult conversations, because usually it's very emotional and contentious. So a lot of managers are not comfortable having those conversations. So this should be part of the training, how managers handle difficult conversation like this one.
So we have another question. How can a person be a champion when they're in fear of losing their job for speaking up? So if you guys don't mind, I'll take this one, right? No job is worth having if speaking up for doing the right thing is going to lead you to be fired. And more often than not, if you're explaining to people what is it that you need in order for you to be successful, and those things that you're needing are reasonable, your supervisor, your manager, your leader should hear you and should champion those. And as long as they are contributing to the organization, there should be no reason to be fearful of losing your job. And I know that that's difficult. That is my plight every day, right? But I have found that every time I've gotten up and stood up and said the right thing, I have been applauded for doing that. I have not been fired. And so it is very important that I share that message, because we all function in fear. I function in fear pretty regularly. But what I do is I just get some courage and some strength, and I stand up and I do the right thing. And so just in dialogue with your supervisors and your managers, and figure out what their value systems are, so that you know how to communicate in a way that you can be a champion. So I don't know if Cecil or Tony have anything to follow up on that.
I think you said it all.
Well said.
So another question is, how can one ensure there is acknowledgement about the biases in an organization when they seem to be unaware since they're privileged, or probably because of their privilege? Tony, would you like to take that, or Cecil, either one?
Cecil, would you like to say something?
Sure. I think one, you can always take leadership roles, if you will. If there are no employee resource groups or affinity groups within your organization, you might want to give some consideration to that. Or if there's maybe a human relations group or some other type of entity where groups of individuals could come together to talk. Maybe even brown bag lunches, sometimes brown bag diversity lunches, those talk, invite managers in, invite supervisors in, and just talk about issues within the organization. You're absolutely correct. A lot of people, simply because of their privilege, don't understand what they're doing, or don't understand the results or the consequences of their actions. So it's important that you bring those things to them, knowing that sometimes, like in the previous question, you might be reluctant or somewhat even fearful, I'd say, to make those comments or have those types of conversations. I think the general group dynamics could prevail in this instance, and I think it would be, in fact, I think it would be very, very effective.
I would like to offer some advice about the job design, because oftentimes people work in silo, but it's not really helpful for people to understand each other's differences and then reduce their biases. So for job design, it's important to have opportunity for interactions and also let people to get to know each other, maybe using different teamwork or put people on different task force so people actually can know each other. For example, Alexis and Cecil, we didn't know each other before this module, but now we are really good friends.
Yes.
So like that's a high five. That's an example of like, job design.
Yes.
Creating tasks like this can make people tie together, bond together.
So the last question, if silence isn't perceived well, and we aren't supposed to ask about certain things, what advice do you have for leaders who don't know how to address issues? How do we start? So that's a really good question. My stab at it is to say, to have leaders pay attention to the people around them. People's body language, people's fear of responding is usually a clue that there's something going on. I'm hearing from echo, so I think I'm just going to have Cecil or Tony finish up.
Yeah, I think this is going to take a whole lot of interaction between management and non-management staff. I think we could do different types of 360 evaluations. We can engage management in opportunities to give them feedback if they're open, if the company can establish some type of safe, harbor, if you will, to provide that. Maybe some type of company climate assessment or employee assessment type of tool. And I believe when managers and supervisors and leaders know that people can make comments about them anonymously, they're going to be somewhat fearful, and that they might correct their actions then. So I do believe implementation of those types of activities could be extremely beneficial to the company.
Thank you. So I have to say thank you so much for tuning in to us. Cecil, Tony, and I are very grateful for the time that you've taken to share with us today. Hopefully you've learned some tools to help you maneuver a little bit easier in the workplace, whether you're part of a privileged group or whether you're not. And without further ado, I want to introduce Terry Daniel, who's going to be talking to us about Module 3.
Wow, what a great session. Thank you so much for joining us. I am looking forward to joining you next week in our Module 3, Understanding Your Organization. And in that session, we'll talk about several different topics, including why diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also governance, inclusive leadership, recruitment and retention strategies, diversifying your supply chain, and we'll also offer a few implementation strategies. We are very much looking forward to you joining us next week in this amazing session. And thank you so much and have a great evening.